The wind howled through Dust Whistle like a banshee, carrying with it the grit and sand that gave the town its name. It was the kind of place where men came to lose themselves in gold fever, and women came to lose themselves entirely. The main street stretched out like a scar across the desert, lined with false-fronted buildings that promised more than they delivered, much like the town itself. Ruby McAllister stood on the balcony of the Scarlet Ember, her saloon, watching the evening crowd begin to gather below. The setting sun painted everything the color of dried blood, and she pulled her shawl tighter against the bite of the October wind. 28 years old and already a legend in her own right, Ruby had built her fortune from nothing but determination and a keen understanding of what men wanted when they were far from home. "Miss Ruby," called Jake, her bartender, from the doorway. "That new deputy's making his rounds again. 3rd time this week." Ruby's green eyes narrowed as she spotted the tall figure in black moving down the street with measured steps. Deputy Elias Ward. He'd arrived from Kansas City 2 weeks ago, and since then, he'd been circling her establishment like a hawk eyeing a rabbit warren. "Let him look," she said, though something in her stomach tightened. "We run an honest business." Jake snorted. "Honest as any saloon can be, I reckon." Ruby descended the stairs with practiced grace, her burgundy dress rustling against the worn wood. The Scarlet Ember was already filling with miners, cowboys, and drifters, men with dust in their throats and loneliness in their hearts. The piano player, Old Tom, was warming up with a melancholy tune that seemed to capture the mood of the whole territory. She moved through the crowd like a ship through water, stopping to greet regulars, laugh at their jokes, pour whiskey for those who could pay. This was her kingdom, built with her own hands after too many years of being told what she couldn't do. The orphanage in St. Louis seemed like another lifetime now, as did the marriage proposal from banker Harold Westbrook that she'd fled west to escape. The bat-wing doors swung open, and Deputy Ward entered. The room didn't exactly fall silent, but conversations quieted, and eyes followed his progress to the bar. He was a man who carried stillness with him like a weapon, tall, lean, with dark hair and eyes the color of winter sky. There was something broken in those eyes, Ruby thought, something that recognized its twin in others. "Deputy," she said, approaching him with a bottle of the good whiskey. "Welcome back to the Scarlet Ember." He looked at her with that unreadable expression she was beginning to hate. "Miss McAllister, just making my rounds. Your rounds seem to bring you here quite often." She poured him a drink, sliding it across the bar. "On the house." "I don't drink on duty." His voice was like gravel, worn down by things he wouldn't speak of. "Then you're the first lawman in Dust Whistle who doesn't?" She left the glass where it was, a challenge between them. Their standoff might have continued, but a crash from the poker tables drew both their attention. Big Pete Morrison, a miner with more muscle than sense, had accused Charlie Hayworth of cheating. Cards scattered across the floor as Pete grabbed Charlie by the collar, lifting him clear off his chair. "You bottom-dealing snake!" Pete roared. "I saw you slip that ace." Ruby started forward, but Deputy Ward was already moving. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, his hand resting on his Colt. "Put him down! Morrison!" Pete turned, still holding Charlie. "This ain't none of your business. Deputy, man cheats at cards, he pays the price. In my town, we handle disputes legally." Ward's voice carried no heat, just iron certainty. "Put him down, or I'll put you down." For a moment, the saloon held its breath. Ruby watched the deputy, seeing the coiled readiness in his stance, the way his fingers flexed near his gun. This was a man who'd killed before and would again if needed, but took no pleasure in it. Pete dropped Charlie, who scrambled away. "Ain't worth the trouble anyway." Pete muttered, but Ruby heard the fear underneath the bluster. "Get out," Ward said. "Cool off. Come back when you can keep your hands to yourself." After Pete stomped out, the saloon slowly returned to life. Ruby found herself standing next to the deputy, close enough to smell the leather and gunpowder scent of him. "Thank you," she said. Though the words tasted strange, she wasn't used to needing anyone's help. He turned those winter eyes on her. "It's my job, Miss McAllister. Though a place like this—" He glanced around at the gambling, the painted ladies working the room, the overall air of barely controlled chaos. "A place like this invites trouble." Her spine stiffened. "A place like this provides comfort to men who have precious little of it. Not all of us can afford to stand on high moral ground. Deputy." "I wasn't—" He stopped, something flickering across his face. "I apologize. That was uncalled for." Before she could respond, one of her girls, Lucy, appeared at her elbow. "Miss Ruby, there's a man asking for you in the back office. Says it's urgent." Ruby frowned. Her office was private territory. "Did he give a name?" "No, ma'am. Just said you'd want to hear what he has to say." Every instinct Ruby had developed in her years of survival screamed danger, but she'd never gotten anywhere by showing fear. "Tell him I'll be there directly." She turned back to Ward, who was watching her with those careful eyes. "If you'll excuse me, Deputy, business calls. Miss McAllister." He touched the brim of his hat and turned to leave, but paused at the door. "Be careful. There's talk around town. Not everyone appreciates a woman owning the most successful establishment in Dust Whistle." Then he was gone, leaving Ruby with a chill that had nothing to do with the desert night. In her office, she found a man she didn't recognize. Thin, well-dressed in a city suit that looked out of place as an orchid in a cactus patch. He didn't stand when she entered, which told her everything she needed to know about his character. "Miss McAllister," he said, voice smooth as oil. "My name is Cornelius Blackwood. I represent certain interests that would like to make you a very generous offer for this establishment." Ruby settled behind her desk, her derringer within easy reach in the drawer. "The Scarlet Ember is not for sale. Mr. Blackwood." "Everything is for sale. Miss McAllister, it's simply a matter of price." He produced an envelope, thick with bills. $20,000, cash. You could go anywhere, start fresh, live like a lady. "I already live exactly as I choose." She didn't touch the envelope. "And the answer is no." His pleasant expression never wavered, but something cold moved in his eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that. My employers are quite eager to develop this part of town. The railroad will be coming through soon. You know, property values will soar, or—" He stood, straightening his vest. "They could plummet. Accidents happen. Fires, especially. These old wooden buildings. All that liquor. Oil lamps burning late into the night." Ruby stood too, her hand moving to the drawer. "Get out of my office, Mr. Blackwood, and don't come back." He smiled, a reptilian expression. "Think about it, Miss McAllister. My offer won't remain open indefinitely." He left a card on her desk. "Pleasant evening to you." After he left, Ruby sank into her chair, heart pounding. She'd faced down drunk miners and violent cowboys, but this felt different. This felt like the world shifting beneath her feet. She locked the money in her safe. She'd return it tomorrow, and made her way back to the main floor. The night was in full swing now, laughter and music filling the air. Her kingdom, her dream, built from nothing. She'd be damned if she'd let some city vulture take it from her. As she moved through the crowd, she caught sight of Deputy Ward through the window, standing across the street, watching. For a moment, their eyes met through the glass. Then he touched his hat and moved on, swallowed by the darkness. Ruby poured herself a whiskey, her hand steady despite the unease crawling up her spine. Whatever came next, she'd face it as she'd faced everything else in her life, alone and unbending. She didn't know that by dawn. Everything would be ash. The rest of the night passed in a blur of normal chaos. Drinks poured, cards dealt, money changing hands. Lucy sang a bawdy song that had the men stomping their feet. Old Tom played until his fingers ached. And through it all, Ruby moved like a queen among her subjects, smiling, laughing, playing the role she'd carved out for herself. It was near 3 in the morning when the last customer stumbled out. Ruby sent her girls home, paid Tom his wages, helped Jake clean up the worst of the mess. routine, comforting in its familiarity. "You all right, Miss Ruby?" Jake asked as they wiped down the bar. "You seem troubled." She considered telling him about Blackwood's visit, then decided against it. Jake was loyal, but he was also a worrier. "Just tired. Jake, you head on home. I'll lock up." Alone in her saloon, Ruby climbed the stairs to her private rooms above. She stood at the window, looking out at Dust Whistle sleeping under the stars. Somewhere out there. Deputy Ward was making his rounds. The thought was oddly comforting. She changed into her nightgown, brushed out her long red hair, tried to push away the feeling that something was ending. Just nerves, she told herself. Blackwood was all talk. Men like him always were. Ruby had just blown out her lamp when she smelled the smoke. The smoke was thick and acrid, clawing at Ruby's throat as she stumbled from her bed. Orange light danced on her bedroom walls, not the gentle flicker of lamplight, but the violent writhing of flames consuming wood. She grabbed her robe and the small leather bag that held her most important papers, then rushed to the window. The scarlet ember was burning. Flames licked up from the first floor, already breaking through windows, sending glass shards raining onto the street below. The heat hit her face like a slap. She could hear the fires roar, a living thing devouring everything she'd built. "Fire! Fire!" The cry went up from somewhere in the street. Ruby saw figures running, forming a bucket brigade, but it was already too late. The flames had taken hold with unnatural speed, as if the whole building had been doused in kerosene. She ran for the stairs, but smoke billowed up, thick and choking. The heat drove her back. Her only chance was the window. Ruby grabbed a chair, smashed it through the glass, and climbed onto the small balcony outside. The drop to the street was 15 feet, enough to break bones if she landed wrong. "Jump!" someone shouted from below. "We'll catch you." Through the smoke, she saw Deputy Ward positioning men with a stretched blanket. His face was grim in the firelight, those winter eyes locked on hers, without giving herself time to think. Ruby sat on the balcony rail, said a prayer to whatever God watched over foolish women, and let herself fall. The impact knocked the breath from her lungs, but strong hands pulled her clear, helped her to her feet. Ward's hands. She realized, still gripping her arms. "Are you hurt?" His voice was rough with smoke or something else. "My saloon," was all she could manage, turning to watch her life's work collapse in on itself. The sound it made was like the world ending, beams cracking, bottles exploding, the piano letting out a death cry as the flames found it. "Ruby!" Jake appeared, soot-streaked and frantic. "Thank God you're alive. I saw the smoke from my place, came running." "Is everyone out?" Ruby asked, suddenly terrified. "The girls, Tom, they all went home hours ago." Jake assured her. "It's just the building. Miss Ruby, just the building." Just the building, just everything she owned, everything she was. Ruby stood there in her nightgown and robe, barefoot on the cold ground, watching $20,000 worth of denied offer turn to ash. The fire brigade worked through the dawn, managing to keep the flames from spreading to neighboring buildings. By the time the sun rose over Dust Whistle, the scarlet ember was a blackened skeleton, wisps of smoke still rising from the ruins like the ghosts of all her dreams. Ruby sat on a barrel across the street, someone's coat around her shoulders. Ward's, she thought, though she couldn't remember him giving it to her. People milled about, some offering sympathy, others just there for the spectacle. She heard the whispers, felt the weight of their stares. Always said it would end badly. Woman running a place like that. Probably insurance fraud. Heard she was in debt. Maybe one of her gentlemen callers got careless with a lamp. Ward appeared at her side, holding a cup of coffee from the hotel. "Drink this," he said, pressing it into her hands. "Then we need to talk." She looked up at him, saw something in his expression that made her stomach drop. "You found something." 3 separate points of origin, he said quietly. Kerosene splashed on the walls. This wasn't an accident. "Miss McAllister, someone wanted your place to burn." Ruby thought of Blackwood's oily smile, his talk of accidents and wooden buildings. But saying it out loud would mean admitting she'd been threatened, admitting she'd needed help. The coffee tasted like ash in her mouth. "I'll need a full statement," Ward continued. "Names of anyone who might have wished you harm. Any unusual incidents." "Deputy Ward," Mayor Thompson approached, his considerable bulk making him wheeze from the short walk. "Terrible business. Terrible. Miss McAllister, you have my deepest sympathies." Ruby noted he didn't offer any practical help, just sympathies. That told her which way the wind was blowing. "I'll be investigating this as arson," Ward said to the mayor. "We'll need—" "Now, Deputy," Thompson interrupted. "Let's not jump to conclusions. These old buildings, all that alcohol, could have been any number of accidents. No need to go stirring up trouble with wild accusations." Ward's jaw tightened. "3 separate points of origin isn't an accident, Mayor." Thompson's friendly mask slipped for just a moment. I said, "No need for trouble. Miss McAllister's been through enough without you making things worse. Perhaps she can stay with one of the good ladies from the church until she gets back on her feet." Ruby almost laughed. The good ladies from the church had been trying to shut her down since she'd arrived in Dust Whistle. They'd sooner take in a rabid coyote than the former Madam of the Scarlet Ember. "I'll manage," she said, standing on unsteady legs. "If you'll excuse me, I need to see what can be salvaged." She walked toward the ruins, Ward falling into step beside her. "You can't stay there," he said. "It's not safe. Nothing I owned is safe anymore. Deputy—" She picked her way carefully through the debris, looking for her safe. It should have survived the fire, but when she found it, it was open and empty. Her money, her deed, her mother's necklace, all gone. "Professional job," Ward observed, examining the safe. Opened it clean, probably during the chaos of the fire. "Miss McAllister, I need to know who threatened you," she wanted to tell him. Wanted to let someone else carry this burden. But Ruby had learned long ago that showing weakness in a town like Dust Whistle was like bleeding in shark-infested waters. "I'm a woman who ran a successful saloon. Deputy. Half the town wanted me gone." She turned away from the safe, from the ruins of her independence. "Take your pick of suspects." Lucy and some of the other girls had gathered at the edge of the wreckage, tears streaming down their painted faces. They'd lost their jobs, their place of relative safety. Ruby had no comfort to offer them. "What will you do now?" Lucy asked. "I don't know," Ruby admitted, the words scraping her throat raw. As the day wore on, the vultures circled. Cornelius Blackwood himself appeared, perfectly pressed despite the early hour, to offer his condolences and remind her that his offer still stood, though, of course, given the circumstances, the price would need to be adjusted. The land was all she had left now, he pointed out. Surely she could see the wisdom in cutting her losses. Ruby told him in terms that would have made a sailor blush exactly what he could do with his offer. Ward, who'd been hovering nearby, stepped forward when Blackwood's face darkened. "Problem here?" the deputy asked mildly. "No problem at all," Blackwood said, but his eyes promised Ruby this wasn't over. "I'll be in town a few more days. Miss McAllister, when you've had time to think more clearly." After he left, Ward studied Ruby with those careful eyes. "He's the one, isn't he? He threatened you." "Can you prove it?" Ruby asked. "Can you tie him to the fire? Because unless you can, all I'll do by accusing him is paint a bigger target on my back." Ward's frustration was evident, but he couldn't argue with her logic. In Dust Whistle, the law was only as strong as the men willing to enforce it, and Mayor Thompson had already made it clear where he stood. As night fell, Ruby found herself with nowhere to go. The hotel had mysteriously become full, and none of the boarding houses would take her. She sat on the steps of what used to be her home, her salvaged belongings in a single carpet bag, and for the first time since she'd fled St. Louis, she felt truly defeated. "You can't stay here." Ward appeared like a shadow, still wearing his coat from that morning. "I've got a place. It's not much, but it's warm and it's safe." Ruby looked up at him. "Deputy, you know what people will say if I—" "Let them talk." His voice was flat, brooking no argument. "I've got a spare room," And you need somewhere to sleep that isn't the street. Unless you'd prefer the jail. I could arrest you for vagrancy. Despite everything, Ruby almost smiled. Is that a threat, Deputy Ward? It's an option. Miss McAllister, your choice. She stood, gathering her meager belongings. What choice did she have? Pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. Lead the way, Deputy, and thank you. His house was on the edge of town, a small but neat cabin that spoke of a man who lived alone and liked it that way. Everything was in its place. Functional and sparse. The only personal touch was a photograph on the mantel, a woman and a young boy, both smiling. Ward saw her looking. My wife and son, he said shortly. They died. Cholera outbreak in Kansas City, 5 years ago. I'm sorry, Ruby said, understanding now the broken thing she'd seen in his eyes. The spare room's through here. He showed her to a small, clean room with a narrow bed and a washstand. I'll get you some water for washing. Are you hungry? Ruby realized she hadn't eaten since the previous evening. Yes. They ate in awkward silence, beans and cornbread. Simple but filling. Ruby was acutely aware of her inappropriate state, wearing only a borrowed dress from Lucy that was too tight and too bright for mourning one's entire life. Why are you helping me? She asked finally. Ward considered the question, pushing beans around his plate. Because someone burned down your life for refusing to sell. Because the mayor wants me to look the other way. Because... He paused, meeting her eyes. Because you jumped from that window trusting I'd catch you. I don't take that lightly. Something passed between them in that moment, fragile as smoke. Then Ward stood, clearing the dishes. You should rest. Tomorrow we'll see about finding who really owns those land documents Blackwood's waving around. Ruby retired to the sparse room, lying on the narrow bed that smelled of soap and cedar. Through the thin wall, she could hear Ward moving about, the ordinary sounds of a man preparing for sleep. It was strange, being in a house with a man without it being a transaction, without expectations or negotiations. She thought of the Scarlet Ember, of the girls scattered to the wind, of Jake who'd likely have to leave town to find work, all because she'd said no to the wrong man. The tears came then, silent and bitter, soaking the pillow that smelled of someone else's life. Somewhere in the darkness, she heard Ward's footsteps pause outside her door, heard him almost knock, then move away. She was grateful for his restraint. Ruby McAllister had lost everything else. She couldn't afford to lose her composure too. Tomorrow she'd figure out how to fight back. Tonight she'd mourn in private, in the spare room of a man whose own losses carved lines around his eyes. In a town that would gossip about her fall from grace before the ashes of her dreams had even cooled. The wind howled through Dust Whistle, carrying smoke and secrets, and Ruby pulled the thin blanket higher, wondering if she'd ever feel warm again. The morning came too soon, bringing with it the harsh reality of Ruby's situation. She woke to the smell of coffee and bacon, sounds of movement in the kitchen. For a moment, she forgot where she was. Then memory crashed back like a physical blow. She dressed in Lucy's gaudy dress, her only option, and steeled herself to face the day. Ward was at the stove, looking oddly domestic in his shirt sleeves, gun belt hanging on a peg by the door. Morning, he said without turning. Coffee's hot. Ruby poured herself a cup, wrapping her hands around its warmth. I need to find work, she said. I can't impose on your hospitality. Already asked around. He set a plate in front of her. The mercantile, the hotel, even the laundry. Nobody's hiring. Nobody's hiring me, you mean? Ruby pushed eggs around her plate. Appetite gone. The fallen woman. The saloon keeper who got too big for her britches. Eat, Ward said. You'll need your strength. She forced down a few bites, watching him move about the kitchen with economical grace. Don't you have rounds to make? Mayor Thompson suggested I take a few days. Let things settle. His voice was neutral, but Ruby heard the anger underneath. Seems my investigation into the fire is making certain people nervous. A knock at the door made them both freeze. Ward's hand moved instinctively toward where his gun belt hung. "Stay here," he said quietly, but the voice that called through the door was familiar. "Deputy Ward, it's Jake Morrison. I need to speak to Miss Ruby if she's here." Ward glanced at Ruby, who nodded. When Jake entered, his face was grim under the trail dust. "Miss Ruby, I'm glad you're safe. I've been riding since dawn, talking to folks." He pulled out a rolled paper. "Found this at the land office in Silver Creek. Thought you should see it." Ruby unrolled the document, Ward reading over her shoulder. It was a claim transfer, dated 3 weeks ago, selling her land to something called the Dust Whistle Development Corporation. Her signature was at the bottom, but she'd never seen this paper before. "That's not my signature," she said. "It's close, but look at the witness." Jake interrupted. "Harold Westbrook. Ain't that the banker from St. Louis you told me about?" Ruby's blood ran cold. Harold, the man she'd fled to escape marriage to, who'd promised to ruin her if she refused him. "He's here? In the territory?" "Gets worse," Jake said. "Dust Whistle Development Corporation. Guess who's the primary investor?" Ward spoke before Ruby could. "Cornelius Blackwood. And Mayor Thompson. And Judge Carter. Half the town's in on it, buying up land cheap before the railroad comes through." Jake's weathered face was angry. "They've done this before. Miss Ruby." "Burned out the Mexican families on the south side last year. Bought their land for pennies." Ruby sank into a chair. It was bigger than just her. Then, a whole conspiracy of greed. And she'd just been in the way. "We can't fight them all." "We can if we prove the signature's forged," Ward said. "If we can tie them to the fire." "With what evidence?" Ruby laughed bitterly. "The judge is in on it. The mayor wants you to drop it. Face it, deputy, they've won." "Like hell." Ward's vehemence surprised her. "I've seen this before. Good people driven out, the law twisted to serve the wealthy. Not again, not in my town." Jake shifted uncomfortably. "There's more. Word is they're putting pressure on anyone who helps you. I've been told if I'm seen with you again, I'll be run out of town, or worse." "Then go," Ruby said. "Jake, you've been a good friend, but I won't have you hurt because of me." "Where will you go?" Jake asked. Ruby didn't have an answer. She had no money, no family, nowhere to run. Ward spoke into the silence. "She's staying here until we sort this out." His tone brooked no argument. "And if anyone has a problem with that, they can take it up with me." After Jake left, slipping out the back way like a thief, Ruby turned to Ward. "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." "I know enough." He was checking his guns, methodical and calm. "I know you built something from nothing. I know you stood up to men who thought they could take what they wanted. I know you're stubborn and proud, and probably more trouble than you're worth." He looked up, almost smiling. "Reminds me of someone I used to know. Your wife. Margaret would have liked you. She had a talent for finding trouble, too." He holstered the Colt. "I'm riding out to check something. Lock the door behind me. Don't answer for anyone you don't know." Alone in the quiet house, Ruby tried to think. She needed allies, but who in Dust Whistle would risk helping her now? The answer came like a slap. The other people Blackwood and his cronies had pushed out. The Mexican families Jake mentioned, the Chinese laundrymen who'd been harassed, the small farmers forced to sell. She found paper and pen in Ward's desk, began writing notes. If she couldn't fight money with money, maybe she could fight it with numbers. But how to deliver them without being seen? The answer came in an unexpected form. That evening, as shadows lengthened, Lucy appeared at the back door. "Miss Ruby, I know the deputy said not to disturb you, but—" Ruby pulled her inside quickly. "Lucy, what are you doing here?" "Me and some of the girls. We've been talking. This ain't right. What they done to you?" Lucy's painted face was fierce with determination. "You gave us work when nobody else would. Treated us fair. We want to help. It's dangerous. So's working the saloons." Lucy produced a bundle from under her cloak. "We took up a collection. It's not much, but it might help. And Rosie says she heard Blackwood talking at the hotel. Something about meeting tomorrow night at the old mine." Ruby hugged the younger woman. Lucy, you're an angel. Can you and the girls deliver some messages for me? Quietly. Sure thing. Miss Ruby, we're good at being invisible when we need to be. Ward returned as darkness fell, dusty and grim. Blackwood's been busy. He's got men watching all the roads out of town. Anyone tries to leave without permission gets turned back, or worse. We're prisoners then. Ruby served the simple dinner she'd prepared, feeling oddly domestic, in all but name, for now. Ward ate mechanically, thinking. But every prison has weak spots. We just need to find them. They spent the evening planning, the lamp burning low between them. Ward spread out a map of the town and surrounding area, marking where Blackwood's men were stationed, where the burned-out families had lived, where the railroad was supposed to come through. It's like a chess game, Ruby observed. They're moving pieces, controlling the board. Then we need to change the game. Ward's finger traced a line on the map. There's an old Apache trail through the mountains, rough going, but a good rider could make it to Fort Buchanan in 2 days. Federal marshals there. You're leaving? Ruby felt an unexpected pang. Not me, Jake. If he's willing, I need to stay here. Keep them thinking we're beaten while we gather evidence. He met her eyes across the table. Can you trust me? Ruby? The use of her first name made something flutter in her chest. Do I have a choice? There's always a choice. His hand moved across the table, not quite touching hers. I'm asking you to trust me anyway. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then a sound outside made them both freeze. Horses, several of them, stopping in front of the house. Stay back, Ward said, moving to the window. His face hardened. Mayor Thompson, with deputies. The knock, when it came, was authoritative. Ward opened the door, hand resting on his gun. Mayor, bit late for a social call. Deputy Ward. Thompson's bulk filled the doorway, lesser men flanking him. I heard you've been harboring Miss McAllister. That's mighty charitable of you. Woman needed a place to stay. Christian duty. Of course. Thompson's smile was oily. But we can't have impropriety. Can we? Unmarried woman, living with a man. What would people think? Ruby stepped into view. What do you want? Thompson? Why, to help, of course. Judge Carter has kindly offered to let you stay at his house. His wife will chaperone. All very proper. Better for everyone's reputation. Ruby saw the trap. In Judge Carter's house, she'd be a prisoner in silk, unable to meet with allies. Watched every moment. That's kind, but I'm comfortable here. Thompson's mask slipped. I'm afraid I must insist, for the moral standards of our community. She stays, Ward said flatly. Deputy, you're already on thin ice. Don't make me remove you from office. Try it. Ward's voice was soft, dangerous. But remember, I know where everybody's buried in this town. Literally, push me, and I might start digging them up. The two men locked eyes. Finally, Thompson stepped back. This isn't over, Miss McAllister. You have until tomorrow night to accept the judge's hospitality. After that, he shrugged. Vagrancy is a crime. Be ashamed to see you in jail. After they left, Ruby sank into a chair, shaking with anger. Tomorrow night, that's when Lucy said Blackwood has his meeting. No coincidence. Ward was thinking fast. They want you locked away while they finish whatever they're planning. Ruby, we need to move faster than we thought. She made a decision. Then I'll need better clothes. Can't fight a war dressed like a dance hall girl. To her surprise, Ward smiled. Margaret's things are in the trunk in my room. You're about her size. She'd want them used for a good cause. Ruby's throat tightened. Elias, I couldn't. Please. His voice was quiet. They've been locked away 5 years. Time they saw light again. Later, dressed in a simple but well-made blue dress that smelled faintly of lavender. Ruby felt more like herself than she had since the fire. She found Ward on the porch, smoking a rare cigarette, watching the stars. Thank you, she said, sitting beside him. For everything. Don't thank me yet. Tomorrow's going to be rough. They sat in companionable silence, the night sounds of the desert around them. Somewhere out there, men were plotting to steal what others had built, but here, in this moment, there was peace. "Elias," Ruby said softly, "whatever happens tomorrow, I'm glad it's you standing with me." He turned to look at her, something raw and honest in his eyes. "So am I, Ruby. So am I." The space between them seemed to shrink. The night air suddenly charged, but before either could act on the pull between them, a coyote howled in the distance, breaking the spell. "You should rest," Ward said, voice rough. "Tomorrow we go to war." Ruby stood, her hand briefly touching his shoulder. "Then we'd better win." Inside, lying in the narrow bed wearing Margaret Ward's nightgown, Ruby stared at the ceiling and planned. They wanted to bury her? Fine, but she'd risen from ashes before, and this time, she wouldn't rise alone. The morning brought word that Jake had made it through the mountain pass. Lucy slipped in at dawn with the news, along with responses from the families Ruby had contacted. The Mexican farmers were willing to meet, but only in secret. The Chinese merchants expressed cautious interest. It was a start, but organizing resistance while being watched was like trying to light a fire in a rainstorm. Ward left early to maintain appearances, making his rounds as if nothing had changed. Ruby spent the day alternating between hope and despair, pacing the small house like a caged cat. As afternoon shadows lengthened, she made a decision that would have consequences she couldn't foresee. "I need to go into town," she told Ward when he returned. "If they're meeting tonight at the old mine, I want to know what they're planning." "Absolutely not." His response was immediate. "It's too dangerous." "Everything's dangerous now." Ruby had changed back into Margaret's blue dress, pinned her hair up properly. "But if I hide here like a frightened rabbit? I've already lost. I built my life by facing things head on. Elias, I won't change now." They argued, but Ruby's will was iron. Finally, Ward agreed to a compromise. She could go to the mercantile for supplies, with him shadowing her from a distance. It would show the town she wasn't broken, wasn't hiding. The walk down Main Street felt like running a gauntlet. Conversations stopped as she passed. Women pulled their skirts aside. Men either leered or looked away. Ruby kept her chin high, her step measured, even as her heart hammered against her ribs. At Morrison's mercantile, she was selecting flour when Cornelius Blackwood appeared beside her, smooth as oil. "Miss McAllister, how lovely you look in morning clothes." His smile was predatory. "Though I hear you found comfortable accommodations." "Mr. Blackwood." She kept her voice level. "Still in town. I see. Oh, I'll be here quite some time. So much business to conclude." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "It's not too late. You know, sign the papers, take the money, leave with some dignity intact. Better than the alternatives." "Is that a threat? Merely an observation?" "Accidents happen. Your saloon burned. Who knows what might burn next? The deputy's house is wood too, isn't it?" Ruby's hand tightened on her basket. "If anything happens to—" "To whom? Your protector?" Blackwood chuckled. "My dear, you're playing house with a man who lost his family through his own negligence. Did he tell you that? How he was too busy chasing outlaws to notice his wife and son were sick until it was too late?" The words hit like physical blows, but Ruby refused to show it. "Get away from me. Think about my offer." He tipped his hat mockingly. "Time's running out." Ruby finished her shopping with shaking hands, aware of Ward watching from across the street. The trip back to his house felt endless. Once inside, she set down her purchases and turned to face him. "Blackwood knows about your family. What happened?" Ward's face went stone. "What did he say?" That it was your fault, that you were working when they got sick." She watched pain flicker across his features. "Elias, you don't have to—" "He's right." The words came out flat, emotionless. "I was 3 days out, tracking the Garrison gang. Margaret sent word she was feeling poorly, asked me to come home. I thought it could wait, thought catching those outlaws was more important than a little fever." He turned away. By the time I got back, half the neighborhood was sick. Cholera spreads fast. She was delirious. Didn't even know me. Tommy had already gone. Ruby moved without thinking, placing her hand on his arm. It wasn't your fault, wasn't it? He looked at her with those winter eyes. I chose the job over my family. And now here I am, making the same mistake, putting you in danger because I can't walk away from a fight. No! Ruby's voice was fierce. You're standing up for what's right. There's a difference between neglect and courage. Elias Ward. And if you can't see that, he kissed her. It was sudden, desperate, full of grief and longing and something that might have been hope. Ruby froze for a heartbeat, then melted against him, her hands finding his face, holding him like he might disappear. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Ward looked as stunned as she felt. Ruby, don't apologize. She stepped back, touching her lips. Just don't apologize. The moment hung between them, fragile and momentous. Then Ward cleared his throat, visibly pulling himself together. The meeting tonight. If you're determined to go, I am. Then we do it my way. Lucy and the girls create a distraction in town. Draw attention. We slip out the back, take the long way around to the mine. We watch, we listen. We don't engage. Information only. Ruby nodded, still feeling the echo of his kiss. And then we use what we learn. Turn their own plans against them. He met her eyes. Together, as darkness fell, they prepared. Ward checked his weapons, gave Ruby a small pistol that had been Margaret's. Just in case. You know how to use it? I ran a saloon in the territories. Elias, of course I know how to shoot. Lucy arrived with two of the other girls, dressed in their brightest finery. We'll put on quite a show, she promised. Have the whole town talking. They slipped out as planned. Ward leading Ruby through back alleys and dry washes. The old buckwheat mine was 2 miles outside town, abandoned when the silver played out, the perfect place for a clandestine meeting. They approached carefully, Ward's experience showing in how he used every shadow, every bit of cover. The mine entrance glowed with lamplight. Horses tethered outside. Ruby counted 8, including Blackwood's fancy eastern saddle. There, Ward whispered, pointing to an old equipment shed with gaps in the walls. We can see and hear from there. They crept forward, Ruby's heart pounding. Inside the mine, voices echoed. They pressed against the shed wall, peering through cracks in the wood. The scene inside was damning. Blackwood stood at the center, Mayor Thompson and Judge Carter flanking him. Several other men Ruby recognized as prominent citizens. And there, to her shock, was Harold Westbrook. Older, softer, but unmistakably the man she'd fled St. Louis to escape. Gentlemen, Blackwood was saying, the railroad contracts are secured. Once we own the entire valley, we'll make 10 times our investment within a year. What about the Mexican farmers? Someone asked. They're getting organized. Thompson waved dismissively. A few more fires, a few broken heads. They'll sell. And the McAllister woman? That was Harold, his voice still carrying that possessive edge she remembered. She always was too stubborn for her own good. Tomorrow night she'll be in protective custody at the judge's house, Carter said, or in jail. Either way, she'll be neutralized. Ward, too, if he interferes. I still say we should have killed her in the fire, another man muttered. Cleaner that way. Ruby felt Ward tense beside her, his hand moving to his gun. Dead martyrs cause problems, Blackwood said. Better she disappears quietly. Harold here has kindly offered to take her back to St. Louis. Past time she learned her place. She's mine, Harold said with satisfaction. Always has been. Just took her a while to understand that. Ruby bit her lip hard enough to taste blood, fighting the urge to be sick. Ward's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing tight. Now, Blackwood continued, about the federal marshals. Our sources say they won't interfere if we keep things looking legal. The key is... A twig snapped under Ruby's foot. The tiny sound echoed like a gunshot in the still night. Inside the mine, voices stopped. What was that? Someone asked. Check it out, Blackwood ordered. Ward pulled Ruby back, but it was too late. Men emerged from the mine, lamplight swinging, guns drawn. There was nowhere to run that wouldn't expose them completely. Well. Blackwood's voice was pleased as he spotted them. Miss McAllister, Deputy Ward, out for an evening stroll. They were surrounded quickly, roughly hauled into the mine. Harold's face lit up with possessive triumph when he saw Ruby. "Hello, my dear," he said. "You've led me quite a chase." "Harold," Ruby kept her voice steady despite her revulsion. "Still can't accept that a woman might not want you?" His face darkened. "You belong to me, Ruby. Your father promised—" "My father is dead. His debts died with him." "Did they?" Harold produced a paper. "Legal contract. You as collateral for his loans, all perfectly binding." "That's not legal." Ward spoke up. "You can't own a person." "Can't I?" Harold smiled. "Judge Carter seems to think otherwise. Don't you, Judge?" Carter looked uncomfortable but nodded. "Debt contracts can be quite comprehensive." "You're all insane," Ruby said. "This isn't medieval England. You can't just—" Blackwood backhanded her, the crack echoing through the mine. Ruby tasted blood. Ward lunged forward, but 3 men held him back. "Enough talk," Blackwood said. "Take them both. The woman goes with Harold tonight. Ward," he considered. "Accidents happen in mines. Old shafts collapse all the time. You kill a deputy, you'll have more trouble than I'm worth," Ward said. "Maybe. Or maybe everyone will think you ran off with your saloon girl, abandoned your duty for a woman. Again." They were being herded deeper into the mine when the sound of horses made everyone freeze. Lots of horses, riding hard. "Boss!" One of the lookouts ran in. "Riders coming. Looks like cavalry." Blackwood's face went pale. "Impossible. The marshals couldn't have—" The thunder of hooves grew louder. Then Jake's voice rang out. "Federal marshals, everyone in the mine, come out with your hands up." Ward smiled grimly. "Guess Jake rode faster than you thought." In the confusion that followed, everything happened at once. Some of Blackwood's men ran for the back exits. Others prepared to fight. Harold grabbed for Ruby, but she drove her elbow into his soft stomach, sending him gasping to his knees. Ward broke free in the chaos, his fist connecting with Thompson's jaw. "Ruby, down!" She dropped as gunfire erupted. The mine became a maze of smoke and shouting, muzzle flashes lighting the darkness. Ruby crawled toward the entrance. The small pistol Ward had given her clutched in her hand. A hand grabbed her ankle. Harold, his face twisted with rage. "You're not leaving me again!" Ruby turned and without hesitation shot him in the shoulder. He screamed, releasing her. She scrambled outside into blessed fresh air, where uniformed marshals were rounding up those who'd tried to flee. "Ruby!" Ward emerged from the mine, dusty but whole. "Are you—" She threw herself into his arms, not caring who saw. "You're alive. Takes more than those fools to put me down." He held her tight. "It's over. We got them." But it wasn't quite over. Blackwood emerged from the mine in custody, his fine clothes torn, his smooth manner finally cracked. He saw Ruby and snarled. "You think you've won? I have lawyers, connections. I'll be out within a week." The lead marshal, a grizzled man with hard eyes, spoke up. "Not likely. Conspiracy, attempted murder of a federal deputy, arson, fraud. You'll be lucky if you see sunlight again." As the criminals were loaded onto horses, Harold was brought out on a stretcher, whimpering. He looked at Ruby with confused hurt. "I offered you everything. Marriage, respectability. You offered me a cage." Ruby said, "I prefer freedom, even if it comes with ashes." The sun was rising by the time the marshals finished their work. Jake had ridden 2 horses to death reaching Fort Buchanan, convincing the marshals that a federal deputy was in mortal danger. They'd pushed hard through the night, arriving just in time. Ward stood with Ruby as they watched the prisoners being led away. The town was waking up, people emerging to stare at the unlikely sight of their mayor and judge in chains. "What now?" Ruby asked. Ward looked at her, something soft in his winter eyes. Now we rebuild. The town will need new leadership, and you'll need a new saloon. With what money? Well, Jake approached, grinning. Funny thing, the marshals found all sorts of illegal contracts in that mine. Judge says they're void, including the one saying you sold your land. You still own that lot. Miss Ruby... Ruby felt tears prick her eyes. Her land. She still had something to build on. Course, Jake continued. Might take some time to get back on your feet. Good thing you got a place to stay. He winked at Ward. Though folks might talk, you staying with the deputy permanent-like. Ward cleared his throat. About that, Ruby, I know this isn't the time or place, but... He took her hands. I'm not a man of pretty words, but I know what I want, and what I want is you. Not just for now. For always. Ruby's heart stopped. Elias Ward, are you proposing to me in front of a mine full of federal marshals? I am. He pulled out a simple gold band. It was Margaret's mother's. Been in my pocket since yesterday. Will you marry me, Ruby McAllister? She looked at this man who'd stood with her against impossible odds, who'd offered her shelter when she had nothing, who kissed like he was drowning and she was air. Yes, she said simply. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger as Jake whooped and the marshals applauded. Then Ward kissed her properly, there in the dawn light, with her whole world in ashes behind her and everything to build ahead. It wasn't the ending she'd planned. It was better. The weeks following the arrests passed in a blur of legal proceedings and town meetings. With Thompson and Carter gone, Dust Whistle found itself having to rebuild more than just buildings. It needed new leadership, new trust, new hope. Ward threw himself into his work, now as acting sheriff, while Ruby navigated the complex process of rebuilding her life. The engagement ring on her finger drew stares and whispers, but also unexpected support. Some of the town's women, freed from their husbands' prejudices, began to nod at her on the street. Mrs. Morrison from the Mercantile even offered her credit. Always admired your grit, she said quietly. Takes courage to build something from nothing. But the revelations from the mine had left deeper scars than Ruby initially realized. One evening, as she sat with Ward going over plans for rebuilding the saloon, Lucy knocked at their door. Miss Ruby, there's a man asking for you, says he has papers from the court. The man was a lawyer from Tucson, thin and nervous. Miss McAllister, I represent the estate of Harold Westbrook. He's filed charges against you for assault and theft. Ruby felt the blood drain from her face. He's in federal custody. Released on bond yesterday. His family has considerable influence. The lawyer handed her the papers. He claims you stole valuable property from him in St. Louis and that you shot him without provocation. Ward read over her shoulder, his jaw tightening. This is harassment. She defended herself. Perhaps, but it will need to be settled in court. In St. Louis. After the lawyer left, Ruby sank into a chair. He won't stop, even from a jail cell. He won't stop until he owns me. Over my dead body. Ward's voice was fierce. That might be what it takes. Ruby stared at the papers. Elias, maybe we should... Don't. He knelt beside her chair, taking her hands. Don't you dare say we should call off the engagement. We face this together. That night, unable to sleep, Ruby found herself going through Margaret's trunk, which Ward had quietly moved to her room. Among the carefully preserved dresses and mementos, she found a journal. She almost put it back, but something made her open it. Margaret Ward had been a woman of depth and humor, her writing revealing someone who loved fiercely and lived fully. One entry caught Ruby's eye. Elias worries I'll regret marrying a lawman, that the danger and uncertainty will wear on me. He doesn't understand. I'd rather have one day of real living with him than a lifetime of safety with someone else. Love isn't about choosing the easy path. It's about choosing the person worth walking the hard path with. Ruby closed the journal, tears on her cheeks. In the next room, she could hear Elias moving restlessly, probably planning how to fight Harold's latest attack. She made a decision. Rising early the next morning, she dressed in her best remaining outfit, one of Margaret's more formal dresses, and went to find Judge Palmer, the federal judge overseeing the conspiracy cases. "Miss McAllister." He greeted her, surprised. "What can I do for you?" "I want to tell you everything," Ruby said. "About Harold Westbrook, about why I really came west, about the fire, all of it." For 2 hours, she talked about her father's gambling debts, Harold's attempts to collect her as payment, her flight to the territories, about building the Scarlet Ember from nothing, about the threats, the fire, Harold's arrival with Blackwood. Palmer listened, occasionally asking questions, his secretary taking notes. "Miss McAllister," Palmer said when she finished, "why didn't you report this earlier?" "Because I was ashamed, because I thought I could handle it alone, because I've spent so long running. I forgot there might be another way." Palmer studied her. "I'll need documentation. Witnesses." "I can get them. The girls who worked for me. They knew about the threats. Jake Morrison saw some of it. And..." She took a breath. "There might be records in St. Louis about my father's debts, about Harold's previous activities." "Previous activities?" Ruby met his eyes steadily. "I wasn't the first woman he tried to collect as payment for a debt. Judge, just the first one who got away." Palmer's expression hardened. "I see. Miss McAllister, are you prepared to testify to all of this in open court?" "Yes, even knowing it will all become public? Your past, your father's debts, everything." Ruby thought of Elias, of the life they were trying to build. "Judge, I've already lost everything once. I've learned that shame is a luxury I can't afford. Yes, I'll testify." When she returned to the house, Ward was waiting, worry etched on his face. "Ruby, where?" "Fighting back," she said simply. "The way I should have from the beginning." She told him everything. About the judge, about her decision to go public with the whole story. Ward listened in silence, then pulled her into his arms. "I'm proud of you," he whispered into her hair. "Margaret would have liked you. You're both braver than you know." The next weeks were a whirlwind. True to her word, Ruby gathered witnesses and documentation. Lucy and the other girls testified about the threats before the fire. Jake provided records showing the pattern of intimidation. Even some of the Mexican families came forward, sharing their own experiences with Blackwood's syndicate. But Harold wasn't backing down. His lawyers arrived from St. Louis, smooth-talking men who painted Ruby as a temptress who'd seduced their client and stolen from him. They produced documents, some real, some clearly forged, supporting Harold's claims. The stress began to show. Ruby lost weight, dark circles appearing under her eyes. Ward grew grimmer, his protective instincts in overdrive. The town itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see which way justice would fall. One evening, as Ruby sat staring at legal documents until the words blurred, a knock came at the door. Ward answered, hand on his gun, but it was Mrs. Chen from the laundry, accompanied by several other women Ruby didn't recognize. "Miss McAllister," Mrs. Chen said in careful English. "We come to help." The women filed in, Mexican farmers' wives, Chinese merchants' daughters, even a few respectable Anglo women from the other side of town. They carried food, fabric, and something more valuable, solidarity. "We know what it's like," one of the Mexican women said. "To have men think they own you, to fight for what's yours. You stood up," another added. "When they burned you out, you didn't run. You stayed and fought. We want to help." Ruby found herself crying, surrounded by women who understood. They shared their own stories, of property stolen, of families threatened, of dignity defended against overwhelming odds. By the end of the evening, Ruby had not just witnesses, but an army. The trial date approached like a storm on the horizon. Harold's team requested it be held in St. Louis, but Judge Palmer ruled it would stay in the territory. "The alleged crimes occurred here," he stated. "Here they'll be adjudicated." 2 nights before the trial, Ruby couldn't sleep. She found Ward on the porch, keeping watch as he did every night now. "Can't sleep either?" she asked, settling beside him. "Just thinking." He put his arm around her. Whatever happens, Ruby, I want you to know, don't. She pressed her fingers to his lips. Don't talk like we're going to lose. I'm trying to be realistic. Harold has money, connections, and I have you. She looked up at him. I have the truth. I have the women who came forward. I have Jake riding to St. Louis to dig up more evidence. That has to count for something. Ward kissed her forehead. You're right. Margaret always said I worried too much. Smart woman. They sat in silence, watching the stars. Tomorrow would bring what it brought, but tonight they had each other. The morning of the trial dawned clear and cold. Ruby dressed carefully in Margaret's most conservative dress, pinning her hair severely back. War paint, she thought, for a different kind of battle. The courthouse was packed. It seemed all of Dust Whistle had turned out, along with reporters from as far as San Francisco. Harold sat with his lawyers, still pale from his wounded shoulder, his face set in lines of arrogant confidence. He looked sure of himself. Ruby murmured to Ward. Let him, Ward replied. Arrogance makes men careless. Judge Palmer called the court to order. What followed was a brutal dissection of Ruby's life, her past, her choices. Harold's lawyers painted her as a calculating woman who'd used her feminine wiles to escape legitimate debts. They questioned her morals, her profession, her relationship with Ward. Ruby endured it all, answering each question honestly, even when the truth hurt. Yes, she'd run a saloon. Yes, she'd fled St. Louis. Yes, she'd shot Harold to save herself from kidnapping. When it was her lawyer's turn, the truth began to emerge. Woman after woman testified about Harold's pattern of predatory behavior. Documents from St. Louis, retrieved by Jake's dangerous journey, showed a history of forged contracts and coerced marriages to settle debts. The most damaging testimony came from an unexpected source, Mrs. Adelaide Forsyth, a respectable widow from St. Louis society, had traveled west for the trial. She told, in devastating detail, how Harold had tried to claim her daughter as payment for her late husband's debts, and how only her family's influence had prevented it. Miss McAllister had no such protection. Mrs. Forsyth said, looking directly at Ruby. She did what I wish I'd had the courage to do. She ran, and then she built a life with her own hands. That takes more virtue than sitting safely in a parlor. Harold's composure finally cracked. He stood, shouting, She's mine! Her father promised. A man's debts must be paid. Sit down, Mr. Westbrook, Judge Palmer ordered coldly. Unless you wish to add contempt to your charges. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. Not guilty on all charges against Ruby. Furthermore, Harold was remanded for trial on charges of conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, and fraud. As the verdict was read, Ruby felt her knees buckle. Ward caught her, holding her as the courtroom erupted. Some cheered, some muttered, but the women who'd supported her surrounded them like a protective wall. It's over, Ward whispered. You're free. But freedom, Ruby was learning, wasn't just the absence of chains. It was what you built afterward. As Harold was led away, still protesting, she turned to face the crowd. Her reputation was in tatters, her past laid bare for all to see, but she was still standing. Miss Ruby! Lucy pushed through the crowd. Look! Outside the courthouse, someone had set up tables. The women who'd supported her were serving food, talking to neighbors, turning the day into an impromptu celebration. Not just of the verdict, but of community, of women supporting women, of justice actually served for once. Mrs. Chen approached with a package. For you, she said, smiling. For new beginning. Inside was fabric, beautiful silk in deep amber, the color of flames that built rather than destroyed. For wedding dress, Mrs. Chen added with a sly smile. Deputy Ward is good man. You be happy. As the sun set over Dust Whistle, Ruby stood with Ward, watching their neighbors, Mexican, Chinese, Anglo, mingling in the street. It wasn't perfect. There were still those who turned away, who whispered behind their hands. But it was a start. So, Ward said, ready to rebuild that saloon? Ruby considered. Actually, I was thinking maybe something different. A restaurant, perhaps. Or a hotel, somewhere respectable women could work without shame. Respectable. H.M.? Ward grinned. Ruby McAllister going respectable. What will they say? Whatever they want, Ruby said, standing on her toes to kiss him. I'm done living for anyone's opinion but my own, and yours. Mine's simple, Ward said against her lips. I love you. Everything else is details. As they walked home through streets that no longer felt hostile, Ruby fingered the amber silk. Yes, she'd rebuild. But this time, she wouldn't be building alone. This time, she had love, community, and the hard-won knowledge that some things were worth fighting for. The ashes of the scarlet ember were cold now, but from them, something new was rising. Something stronger. Something that belonged not just to her, but to all the women who'd stood with her. All the people who'd chosen justice over easy profit. Harold Westbrook had been wrong. She'd never belonged to him. She belonged to herself. And that, Ruby thought as Ward took her hand, was the greatest freedom of all. The winter came hard to Dust Whistle that year, bringing with it bitter winds and the kind of cold that settled into bones. Ruby had thrown herself into planning her new establishment, but the legal battles had drained her finances. The empty lot where the Scarlet Ember once stood was covered in snow, a blank canvas that mocked her ambitions. Ward found her there one gray afternoon, standing in the ruins, her coat pulled tight against the wind. You'll catch your death, he said, wrapping his arms around her from behind. Sometimes I wonder if I'm fooling myself, she admitted, thinking I can build something respectable. Maybe they're right. Maybe a saloon girl is all I'll ever be. Ruby McAllister. He turned her to face him. You're the strongest woman I know, but even strong women need to rest sometimes. Come home. Home. The word still felt foreign, even after months of living under Ward's roof. They'd planned to marry before Christmas, but with the trials and the financial strain, it kept getting pushed back. Some nights, lying in her narrow bed, Ruby wondered if they were tempting fate, waiting too long, giving the world too many chances to tear them apart again. That evening, as she helped Ward with the dishes, a domestic scene that still surprised her, a knock came at the door. Ward tensed, hand moving to his gun, but Ruby recognized the voice calling out. It's Jake, she said, moving to let him in. Jake entered, bringing cold air and news. Miss Ruby, Deputy, sorry to bother you, but thought you should know. There's been trouble at the Chen Laundry. Windows broken, threatening notes. Ward was already reaching for his coat. Same as the others? Looks like, ever since the trial, seems like everyone who stood with Miss Ruby's been getting visits. Ruby felt sick. This is my fault. They're being punished for helping me. This is Harold's doing, Ward corrected grimly. Or what's left of his syndicate. I'll go check on the Chens. I'm coming with you. Ruby said, Ruby, those people risked everything for me. I won't hide while they suffer for it. They found the Chen family cleaning broken glass, their youngest children crying, Mrs. Chen looked up as they entered, trying to smile through her tears. Is nothing, she said. Just angry men. We are fine. But they weren't fine. Ruby could see the fear in their eyes, the way Mr. Chen kept his children close, on the wall. Someone had painted words that made Ruby's stomach turn. This ends now, Ward said, his voice like iron. Jake, get Tom Bradley and Will Morrison. We're going to start regular patrols. Anyone else gets threatened, they'll have to go through us. As they organized protection for the families who'd supported Ruby, she felt the weight of responsibility crushing her. These people had stood up for her, and now they were paying the price. That night, unable to sleep, Ruby made a decision. She found paper and pen and began writing. By dawn, she had a plan. You want to what? Ward stared at her over breakfast. I want to meet with whoever's behind these attacks. Face to face. End this before someone gets hurt. Absolutely not. Ruby, these aren't businessmen playing rough. These are Harold's men, criminals with nothing to lose. Then what do you suggest? Let them terrorize innocent families? Let them drive out everyone who supported me. She pushed her plate away. I won't have that on my conscience. Elias. They argued, but Ruby was immovable. Finally, Ward agreed to a compromise. She could send word through Jake that she was willing to negotiate, but any meeting would be on their terms. With Ward and armed deputies present, the response came 2 days later. Harold's former associate, a man named Silas Crawford, would meet with her at the old mission outside town, neutral ground. The morning of the meeting, Ruby dressed carefully. Not in Margaret's modest dresses this time, but in one of her old saloon gowns that Lucy had saved. Deep red, elegant but bold, war paint of a different kind. You sure about this? Ward asked as they prepared to leave. No, Ruby admitted. But I'm tired of reacting. Time to take control. The mission was a crumbling adobe structure, half reclaimed by the desert. Crawford waited inside with 2 men, all armed. He was younger than Ruby expected, with the hungry look of a man who'd grown up taking what he wanted. Miss McAllister. He greeted her, eyes traveling over her dress. You look well for a woman who's lost everything. Mr. Crawford. Ruby kept her voice steady. Shall we discuss terms? Terms. He laughed. Lady, you don't have anything to negotiate with. Harold might be in prison, but his reach is long. These attacks? They're just the beginning. What do you want? Same thing Harold wanted. You gone. This town was profitable before you started stirring things up. We want it profitable again. And if I leave? Crawford shrugged. Then maybe these accidents stop happening to your friends. Ward stepped forward. You're threatening a federal witness. That's a hanging offense. Prove it. Crawford said easily. I'm just a businessman discussing options. Ruby felt the old anger rising, the same fire that had driven her west in the first place. Let me make something clear. Mr. Crawford, I've been threatened by better men than you. I've lost everything and rebuilt. You think broken windows and nasty words will drive me out? You don't know who you're dealing with. Don't I? Crawford's smile was ugly. A whore who got above herself. A woman who thinks she can play with the big boys. Let me tell you something. Sweetheart, this territory ain't big enough for both of us. Then I guess one of us will have to go, Ruby said quietly. And it won't be me. The tension in the room ratcheted higher. Crawford's men shifted, hands near their guns. Ward and the deputies tensed in response. For a moment, violence hung in the air like smoke. Then Crawford laughed. You've got sand, lady. I'll give you that. But sand won't stop bullets. Think about my offer. You've got 1 week. After that, he shrugged. Well, accidents happen. Ask your friend at the saloon. Ice flooded Ruby's veins. What friend? The pretty blonde. Lucy, was it? Working at the Silver Dollar now? Shame if something happened to that beautiful face. Ward had to physically hold Ruby back. You touch her. Weeks ticking. Miss McAllister, Crawford said, walking out. Tick-tock. The ride back to town was silent, Ruby shaking with rage and fear. Lucy. They were threatening Lucy. We'll protect her, Ward said. Move her somewhere safe. Where? Ruby's voice was bitter. Where in this town is safe from them? They found Lucy at the Silver Dollar, serving drinks to the afternoon crowd. Her face lit up when she saw Ruby, then fell at their expressions. What's wrong? Ruby explained quickly, watching Lucy go pale. I'm so sorry. This is my fault. Stop that. Lucy's chin came up. I knew what I was doing when I stood by you. We all did. I'm not running. Lucy. No, Miss Ruby. They ran you out of your place. They won't run me out of mine. She looked at Ward. Though I wouldn't say no to some protection. Ward nodded. You'll have it. Nobody works alone anymore. We look out for each other. That night, as they prepared for bed, Ruby felt the walls closing in. Crawford's deadline loomed, and she had no good options. Leave and let them win, or stay and watch innocent people suffer. Talk to me, Ward said, sitting on her bed. I can see you thinking yourself in circles. What if I'm wrong? She whispered. What if my pride is putting everyone in danger? Your pride? Ward cupped her face. Ruby, you're fighting for the right to exist, to build a life. That's not pride. That's courage. Courage won't stop bullets. Crawford was right about that. Maybe not, but courage inspires others. Look what happened at the trial. People stood up because you showed them it was possible. He kissed her forehead. We'll figure this out. Together. But as Ruby lay awake listening to the wind howl, she wondered if together would be enough. Crawford had given her a week. 7 days to find a solution that didn't exist. To protect people who'd risked everything for her. In the darkness, she made another decision. If Crawford wanted to play rough, she'd show him what a saloon girl who'd survived everything could do. She'd learned to fight in the smoke-filled rooms of the Scarlet Ember, reading men's tells, knowing when to hold and when to strike. The game wasn't over. Not yet. 3 days into Crawford's deadline, unexpected help arrived. A telegram from St. Louis, delivered by a nervous boy who wouldn't meet Ruby's eyes. Harold Westbrook found dead in cell, apparent suicide, estate in chaos, all contracts void. Ruby read it 3 times before the words sank in. Harold was dead. The man who'd haunted her across half a continent was gone. But instead of relief, she felt only a hollow sadness. What a waste of a life, consumed by the need to own what couldn't be possessed. This changes things, Ward said, reading over her shoulder. Crawford's lost his backing. Or it makes him more dangerous. Ruby pointed out. A cornered animal with nothing to lose. She was right. The attacks escalated. The Silver Dollar's windows were smashed. Misses. Chen found her laundry supplies contaminated with lye. One of the Mexican farmers who testified woke to find his well poisoned. On the 6th day, Ruby stood again in the ruins of the Scarlet Ember. But this time, she wasn't alone. Lucy was there, and Mrs. Chen, and a dozen other women. They'd come with hammers and nails, fabric and determination. "What are you doing?" Ruby asked, stunned. "Building." "Mrs. Chen said simply, "You say you want hotel for respectable women? We help build. But Crawford is one man," said Maria Gonzalez, whose husband had been burned out the year before. "We are many. You showed us that." As the women worked, clearing debris and salvaging what could be saved, men began to drift over. First Jake, then Tom Bradley, then others. By noon, half the town was there, rebuilding what had been destroyed. Crawford appeared at the edge of the crowd, his face dark with rage. "You think this changes anything?" he shouted. "1 week, I said—" Ruby walked through the crowd to face him. Behind her, she felt the solid presence of Ward, of Jake, of all the people who'd chosen community over fear. "Your week's not up yet," she said calmly. "But when it is, I'll still be here. We'll all still be here. So you'd better get used to it." Crawford's hand went to his gun. 30 weapons cleared leather in response. He looked around, seeing not a mob but a town united. For the first time, an uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "This isn't over," he snarled. "Yes," Ruby said quietly. "It is. Harold's dead. His money's gone. You're just a bully without backing. Leave now, while you can." For a long moment, Crawford stood frozen. Then, with a curse, he turned and stalked away. His 2 men followed, not meeting anyone's eyes. "Think he'll be back?" Jake asked. "Maybe," Ward said. "But if he is, we'll be ready." As the sun set over Dust Whistle, Ruby stood in what would be the lobby of her new hotel. It would be smaller than the Scarlet Ember, built with donated lumber and shared labor. But it would be hers, and more than hers. It would belong to everyone who'd helped build it. "You did it," Ward said, pulling her close. "You faced them down." "We did it," Ruby corrected. "All of us." That night, there was a celebration in the street. Music and dancing, Mexican food and Chinese tea, laughter in a dozen languages. Ruby moved through it all in a daze, overwhelmed by the simple fact of community. "Miss Ruby!" Lucy appeared, glowing with excitement. "I have news. The ladies took up a collection. For your wedding, Mrs. Chen's making your dress, and Father Miguel says he'll perform the ceremony whenever you're ready. Ruby felt tears threaten. After everything, the fire, the trials, the threats, these people still believed in the possibility of joy. Still believed in tomorrow. She found Ward talking to Jake, planning patrol schedules. Always the protector, always thinking ahead. When he saw her coming, his face softened into a smile that was just for her. "Dance with me," she said, holding out her hand. "Here, now? Here, now, before something else goes wrong." He took her hand, and they danced in the street while their neighbors played music, and their future hotel rose from the ashes behind them. It wasn't the life Ruby had planned when she'd fled west. It was messier, harder, more complicated. It was also more beautiful than anything she could have imagined. "I love you," she told Ward as they swayed together. "Thank you for catching me when I jumped. Always," he promised. Always. The next morning would bring new challenges. Crawford might return with reinforcements. The railroad was still coming, bringing change whether they wanted it or not. There would be more fights, more fears, more nights when the weight of it all seemed too much. But tonight, Ruby McAllister danced with the man she loved in a town that had become home, surrounded by people who'd chosen courage over comfort. The scarlet ember was gone, but from its ashes, something stronger had risen. Not just a building, a community, a future. And that, Ruby thought as Ward spun her under the stars, was worth everything they'd fought for. Crawford's departure should have brought peace, but Ruby knew better than to trust in easy endings. The telegram she received a week later confirmed her suspicions. It was from Judge Palmer, brief and troubling. Harold Westbrook's death under investigation, murder suspected, federal marshals returning to Dust Whistle. She showed it to Ward over breakfast, watching his face darken. "Someone cleaned house," he said, "removed Harold before he could testify against the rest of the syndicate. Or Crawford did it to seize control." Ruby suggested, "Either way, we're not done with this." The marshals arrived 3 days later, led by the same grizzled captain who'd arrested Blackwood. Captain Samuel Morrison was a man who'd seen too much and trusted too little, his weathered face telling stories of pursuit across unforgiving territories. "Miss McAllister, Deputy Ward." He greeted them in Ward's office. "Seems trouble follows you folks like a shadow." "We don't go looking for it, Captain," Ward replied. "Maybe not, but it finds you all the same." Morrison produced a file. Harold Westbrook was poisoned, strychnine in his food. Prison guards missing, likely paid off. We tracked money transfers back to an account here in Dust Whistle. Ruby felt a chill. "Crawford? That's what we're here to find out. But Crawford's disappeared too, left town the night after your confrontation, according to witnesses." Morrison's eyes were sharp. "You wouldn't know anything about that, would you?" "He left under his own power," Ward said firmly. "Plenty of witnesses saw him ride out." Morrison didn't look convinced. "Well, we'll be conducting a thorough investigation. In the meantime, Miss McAllister, I'll need you to go through everything again. Every detail about Harold, Blackwood, the whole syndicate." The next days were a blur of questions and revelations. The marshals uncovered a web of corruption stretching from St. Louis to San Francisco, land fraud, murder, extortion, all tied back to a group of wealthy men using the lawlessness of the frontier to build empires. But it was Lucy who provided the breakthrough. She came to Ruby one evening, nervous and determined. "Miss Ruby, I need to tell you something about Crawford." She twisted her hands. He approached me before he left, offered me money to poison you." Ruby's blood ran cold. "Lucy, I played along," Lucy continued quickly. "Pretended to consider it. He gave me this." She produced a vial of clear liquid. "Said to put it in your tea. Make it look like suicide, like you couldn't handle the pressure." Ward took the vial carefully. "This is evidence. Lucy, you're brilliant." "I was scared," Lucy admitted. "But I remembered what you taught us, Miss Ruby, that we're stronger than they think. So I took his money and his poison, and I was going to tell you, But then he disappeared. Ruby hugged the younger woman tightly. "You did perfect. This proves Crawford was planning murder." Captain Morrison was very interested in the vial. Tests confirmed it was the same poison used on Harold. But Crawford remained missing. And as days turned to weeks, it became clear he'd vanished completely. "Probably in Mexico by now," Morrison said grimly. "But we'll keep looking. In the meantime, Miss McAllister, I'd suggest you remain vigilant." Vigilant, as if Ruby had ever been anything else, despite the ongoing investigation. Life in Dust Whistle continued. The hotel construction progressed, and with it, Ruby's determination to create something lasting. She hired Mrs. Chen as head seamstress for the hotel's planned dress shop, brought in Maria Gonzalez to run the kitchen. It would be more than a hotel. It would be a place where women could work with dignity and pride. One evening, as Ruby reviewed architectural plans by lamplight, Ward surprised her. "Put those away," he said. "We have somewhere to be. Elias, I need to— trust me." He held out her coat. "Please." Curious despite herself, Ruby let him lead her through town to the small church. Inside, she gasped. The space was decorated with candles and winter flowers. Father Miguel stood at the altar, smiling. Their friends filled the pews. Jake, Lucy, the Chens, the Gonzalez family, even crusty Captain Morrison. "What is this?" "Our wedding," Ward said simply. "I'm tired of waiting for the perfect moment. Ruby, every time we delay, something else happens." "So I asked our friends to help, and—" He gestured to the transformed church. "Surprise?" Ruby felt tears spring to her eyes. "But I'm not dressed." Mrs. Chen stood, holding a box. "We prepare. Lucy, get you ready." In a daze, Ruby let herself be whisked to the vestry. The dress was the amber silk Mrs. Chen had given her, transformed into a gown that somehow managed to be both elegant and practical, much like Ruby herself. Lucy pinned her hair with combs that had belonged to Margaret Ward. Something borrowed, from the man who'd given her everything. "You're beautiful," Lucy whispered. "Now go marry that man before something else goes wrong." Ruby laughed through her tears. It wasn't the wedding she'd imagined as a girl. No society reception, no lengthy engagement, no pristine white dress. It was better. It was real. Jake walked her down the aisle, gruff and emotional. Ward waited at the altar, his eyes soft with love and wonder. Father Miguel performed the ceremony in a mixture of English and Spanish, blessing their union in multiple languages as befitted their community. "Do you, Ruby McAllister, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" "I do." The words came out strong and certain. "Do you, Elias Ward, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." His voice was rough with emotion. "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." Ward kissed her as their friends erupted in celebration. For a moment, all the danger and uncertainty faded. There was only this, the two of them, joined before God and community, stronger together than apart. The celebration that followed was typical Dust Whistle, a mixture of traditions, foods, and languages. Morrison even cracked a smile, toasting them with whiskey that definitely wasn't regulation. "To the most stubborn couple in the territory," he said, "may your enemies always underestimate you." It was near midnight when Ward and Ruby finally returned home. Their home now. Truly. Ruby still wore her wedding dress, unwilling to let the magic end. "Mrs. Ward," Elias said, testing the words. "How does it feel?" "Strange. Good. Right." She turned in his arms. "I never thought I'd be anyone's wife again. Never wanted to be. But with you, I know." He kissed her softly. "I never thought I'd marry again either. Margaret's death nearly broke me, but you brought me back to life. Ruby, you and your fierce heart and your refusal to break." They stood together in their small house, two damaged people who'd found wholeness in each other. Outside, Dust Whistle slept under a blanket of stars. Somewhere, Crawford was running. Somewhere, powerful men were plotting. But here, now, there was peace. The morning brought them back to reality. A rider came in hard from the south, bearing news that Crawford had been spotted in Tucson, trying to hire gunmen. The threat wasn't over. But as Ruby stood with her new husband, planning their response, she realized something had changed. She wasn't fighting alone anymore. She had Ward, had the town, had a future being built board by board. "Let him come," she said, surprising herself with her calm. "We've faced worse." Ward smiled, that slow smile she'd grown to love. "Yes, Mrs. Ward, we have." The final confrontation with Crawford would come. Ruby was certain of that. He was too proud, too angry to let things lie. But when it did, they'd be ready. The whole town would be ready. She looked out the window at the hotel taking shape, at the people going about their daily lives, at the community that had grown from the ashes of destruction. This was what she'd been building toward all along. She realized, not just a business, but a place to belong. "Ruby?" Ward touched her shoulder. "You all right?" "Yes." She turned to him, smiling. "For the first time in my life, I'm exactly where I want to be." That afternoon, they received another telegram. This one was from an unexpected source, Adelaide Forsyth, the society woman who'd testified at the trial. "Have information about Crawford and remaining syndicate members. Coming to Dust Whistle. Trust no one until I arrive." Ruby showed it to Ward, unease prickling her spine. What could she know? "We'll find out soon enough." Ward checked his guns, a habit that had become second nature. "Until then, we stay alert." But alertness couldn't prevent what came next. 2 nights later, Ruby woke to the smell of smoke, not the violent blaze of the Scarlet Ember's destruction, but something subtler, gas. Someone had opened the gas lines in the kitchen. "Elias!" She shook him awake. "Gas leak." They stumbled outside, Ward pulling her clear as the house filled with poisonous fumes. In the moonlight, a figure moved. Crawford, holding a torch. "Congratulations on the wedding," he called. "Shame it'll be so short." Ward drew his gun, but Crawford had cover behind their woodpile. "It's over. Crawford, the marshals know everything." "Do they?" Crawford laughed. "They know what Harold told them, but Harold's dead, and dead men tell no tales." "Drop the torch," Ward commanded. "Don't make this worse." "Worse!" Crawford's voice cracked. "You people ruined everything. We had a perfect setup, and you—" He gestured wildly with the torch. "You had to play hero." Ruby stepped forward, Ward trying to hold her back. "It was never perfect. Crawford, it was built on theft and murder. It was always going to fall." "Shut up!" Crawford raised the torch higher. "You think you've won? I've got men coming. Hired guns from Tucson. Your little town is going to burn. And you with it." A shot rang out. Crawford jerked, the torch falling from his hand into the dirt. Behind him, Captain Morrison stepped from the shadows, smoking rifle in hand. "Sorry to interrupt," Morrison said dryly, "but I've heard enough. Crawford clutched his shoulder, cursing. As Ward moved to secure him, more marshals emerged from hiding spots around the house. "We've been watching since the Forsyth woman's telegram," Morrison explained. "Figured Crawford would make a move, just didn't expect him to be stupid enough to try it himself." As Crawford was led away, Ruby found herself shaking, not from fear, but from relief. It was over. Finally. Truly over. "The hired guns?" Ward asked Morrison. "Arrested them this afternoon coming into town. Crawford really should have paid in advance." Morrison tipped his hat to Ruby. "Ma'am, you've got more lives than a cat. Try not to use them all up." Adelaide Forsyth arrived the next day, a formidable woman in traveling clothes who looked at the half-built hotel with approval. "You've done well here," she told Ruby over tea. "Built something from nothing." "Why did you come?" Ruby asked. "Your telegram." "I've spent months investigating the syndicate," Adelaide said. "My husband was one of them. You see, I didn't know until after his death. When I found the papers, the guilt, well, I couldn't let it stand." She produced a leather portfolio. Names, dates, transactions, everything Harold was going to testify about and more. The syndicate is finished, but I wanted you to have this, evidence of what you fought against. Proof that you won. Ruby looked through the papers, seeing the scope of what they'd faced. It was staggering, a criminal empire built on the bones of the frontier, and she'd helped bring it down. "Thank you," she told Adelaide. "For everything." "No, my dear, thank you. You showed that one person standing up can make a difference. That's a lesson worth learning, even late in life." That night, Ruby and Ward sat on their porch. Morrison's men had cleared the gas and declared the house safe. The hotel construction continued by lamplight, people working late because they wanted to, because they were building something together. "It's really over," Ruby said, still not quite believing it. "This part is," Ward agreed. "There'll be other challenges. The railroad's still coming, town's going to change, but we'll face it together." "Together." He pulled her close. "Mrs. Ward, I do like the sound of that." Ruby smiled, watching their town, their home, prepare for whatever came next. She'd started this journey running from a man who thought he owned her. She'd ended it surrounded by people who'd chosen to stand with her. The Scarlet Ember was gone, but Ruby McAllister Ward had found something better than any saloon, any fortune. She'd found a place to belong, a man to love, and a future worth fighting for. And that, she thought as the stars came out over Dust Whistle, was the greatest fortune of all. 6 months had passed since Crawford's arrest, and the desert was blooming with spring wildflowers. Ruby stood on the hill overlooking Dust Whistle, watching the changes that had transformed her town. The railroad had finally arrived, bringing with it new faces, new opportunities, and new challenges. But the heart of the community remained strong, forged in the fires of shared struggle. The Ruby's Rest Hotel stood complete on the site of the old Scarlet Ember. 3 stories of honest construction and hope. It wasn't the fanciest establishment in the territory, but it was clean, welcoming, and most importantly, it provided good wages and safe working conditions for women who might otherwise have few options. "Admiring your handiwork?" Ward appeared beside her, still wearing his sheriff's star but looking more at ease than she'd ever seen him. "Our handiwork," Ruby corrected. "None of this would exist without you, without everyone who helped build it." They walked down the hill together, passing the new schoolhouse where Mrs. Chen taught English to immigrant children, the expanded mercantile that now carried goods from around the world, the church where Father Miguel held services in 3 languages. Dust Whistle had become what America promised to be, a place where different people could build something together. At the hotel, Lucy greeted them with a ledger. "We're full up again. Ruby, that's 3 weeks running. Might need to think about expanding." Ruby laughed. "Let's master what we have first. How are the new girls working out?" "Good. Maria's got the kitchen running smooth, and that new seamstress from Denver is teaching the others fancy stitching." Lucy's face glowed with pride. She'd become Ruby's right hand, managing the hotel with efficiency and warmth. "Any trouble?" Ward asked. Still protective even in peacetime. "Nothing we can't handle. Though there was a man asking about you yesterday. Ruby said he was a journalist from San Francisco, wanting to write your story." Ruby sighed. Since the trials and the dismantling of the syndicate, she'd received several such requests. The tale of the saloon owner who'd fought corruption and won had spread far beyond Arizona territory. "Tell him what I tell all of them. I'm too busy living my story to spend time telling it," Ruby said. That evening, as had become their custom, Ruby and Ward took their dinner at a table in the hotel restaurant, surrounded by the gentle chaos of their extended family. Jake regaled newcomers with tales of the old days, carefully edited for mixed company. The Chen children played between tables while their mother discussed expansion plans with Maria. It was loud, sometimes chaotic, and absolutely perfect. "Ruby," Ward said quietly, reaching across the table to take her hand. "I have something to tell you." Her heart skipped. After all they'd been through, serious pronouncements still made her nervous. "What is it?" I've been offered a position, federal marshal. Morrison wants me to help clean up other towns like we did here. He watched her carefully. It would mean traveling, being away sometimes. Ruby considered this. A year ago, she would have seen it as abandonment, as choosing work over family. But now, you should take it, she said firmly. This is what you're meant to do. Elias, help people, bring justice. You're sure? I know how it was with Margaret. I'm not Margaret, Ruby said gently. I have the hotel, the town, our friends. I won't be sitting home alone, worrying. I'll be here, building, growing, waiting for you to come home with new stories. Relief flooded his face. Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times. You're slipping. Marshal Ward. That night, they walked out to the place where the scarlet ember had stood. Someone had planted a garden there, desert roses and sage, tough plants that could survive anything. Ruby knelt, touching the earth that had once been soaked with smoke and loss. Do you miss it? Ward asked. The saloon? Sometimes, Ruby admitted. It was simpler in some ways. Just me, responsible for no one but myself. She stood, brushing dirt from her hands. But simple isn't always better. What we have now, complicated and messy and real, it's worth more than simplicity. A figure approached through the darkness. Adelaide Forsyth, who'd extended her stay indefinitely, claiming the desert air was good for her constitution. Ruby suspected she simply enjoyed being part of something vital and growing. Ruby, Elias. She greeted them. I've just had word from St. Louis. The last of the syndicate members have been convicted. It's truly finished. They stood together in the garden. 3 people who'd fought corruption in their own ways, who'd chosen justice over ease. The night was warm, filled with the sound of crickets and distant laughter from the hotel. What will you do now? Ruby asked Adelaide. Go back to St. Louis? Heavens, no. Adelaide smiled. I've invested in the new bank here. Someone needs to ensure it's run honestly. Besides, I've grown quite fond of Maria's enchiladas. Ward laughed, the sound still rare enough to be precious. Dust Whistle does have a way of keeping people. As they headed back to the hotel, Ruby reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From the desperate girl fleeing St. Louis to the woman who'd watched her dreams burn. From the fighter who'd stood against corruption to the builder creating something new. Each version of herself had been necessary. Each loss and victory shaping who she'd become. Elias, she said suddenly, I want to put up a monument where the scarlet ember stood, something to remember what happened here, what we all fought for. What kind of monument? Ruby thought. A phoenix, rising from ashes, with all our names, everyone who stood together when it mattered. I like it, Ward said. A reminder that sometimes things need to burn down before something better can grow. They reached their house, expanded now, with a proper kitchen and a room they hadn't quite dared to designate yet. Ruby caught Ward looking at that empty room sometimes, hope and old grief warring in his eyes. When you come back from your first assignment, Ruby said carefully, maybe that room won't be empty anymore. Ward stopped walking. Ruby, are you... Not yet, she said quickly. But I've been thinking about family, about the future, about what we're building here being for more than just us. He pulled her close, burying his face in her hair. I never thought I'd have another chance at that. Neither did I, but we've made a habit of doing things we never thought possible. Inside, they prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of a couple who'd found their rhythm. Ruby brushed out her hair, still long, still red as flame, though now usually pinned up respectably. Ward cleaned his guns, checked his papers for the morning journey to Tucson where he'd receive his federal commission. I'll be gone 2 weeks, he said. Will you be all right? Ruby smiled. I survived Harold Westbrook, Cornelius Blackwood, and Silas Crawford. I think I can manage 2 weeks without you. That's not what I meant. I know. She moved to sit beside him. I'll miss you, but I'll be proud, knowing you're out there making other towns safe. and I'll be here when you come home, probably with 12 new problems for you to help solve." They lay together in the darkness, no longer in separate rooms, no longer holding back from the connection that had saved them both. Ruby traced the scars on Ward's hands, evidence of battles fought and won. "Tell me about the Phoenix," he said quietly. "What will the inscription say?" Ruby had already thought about this. From the ashes of injustice, a community rises. In memory of those who stood together when standing alone would have been easier. Dust whistle. 1881. "Perfect," Ward murmured, already drifting toward sleep. But Ruby lay awake a while longer, thinking about the inscription, about the town, about the future stretching ahead bright with possibility. Through the window, she could see lights in the hotel, hear the faint sound of the piano they'd installed in the main room. Not the same as the old Scarlet Ember piano, but music nonetheless. Tomorrow, Ward would leave on his first assignment. Lucy would need help with a difficult guest. The Gonzalez family would bring news of their expanded farm. Mrs. Chen would want to discuss the dress shop's growing reputation. Adelaide would have plans for civic improvements. Life would continue, rich and full and demanding. But tonight, Ruby simply held her husband and marveled at the journey. She'd lost everything and found so much more. She'd been broken and had rebuilt herself stronger. She'd faced down men who thought they could own her and had claimed her freedom with both hands. The morning came too soon, bringing farewells and promises. Ruby stood with half the town to see Ward off, proud of the federal badge he now wore alongside his sheriff's star. 2 weeks, he promised again, kissing her in full view of everyone. "I'll be counting," she replied, as his figure disappeared into the distance. Lucy appeared at Ruby's elbow. "Come on, boss. We've got a hotel to run." Ruby took one last look at the road, then turned back to her life. The Ruby's Rest Hotel waited, full of possibilities and problems in equal measure. The desert sun climbed higher, painting everything in shades of gold and promise. She thought of the phoenix they would build, rising from ashes, wings spread toward the sky. It would stand as testament not just to what had been lost, but to what had been found: courage, community, and the knowledge that some things were worth fighting for. "You're right," she told Lucy, lifting her chin and stepping forward. "We've got work to do." As they walked back toward the hotel, Ruby could swear she smelled sage and roses on the wind, growing wild where once there had been only ash. The fire had cleared the ground for new growth, and what was growing was beautiful. In 2 weeks, Ward would return with stories of justice served. In a year, that empty room might hold a cradle. In a decade, Dust Whistle might be unrecognizable, grown beyond their wildest dreams. But for now, there was today, bright and full and waiting to be lived. Ruby McAllister Ward, former saloon owner, survivor of fires both literal and metaphorical, stepped into her hotel with a smile. She had coffee to brew, guests to tend, a community to nurture. And somewhere in the distance, she could hear the whistle of the train that connected Dust Whistle to the wider world, carrying promises of adventures yet to come. The sound no longer threatened, but welcomed, because she'd learned the greatest truth of all. Home wasn't a building that could burn. It was the people who stood with you in the ashes, ready to rebuild. It was love that endured loss, hope that survived despair, and the courage to keep fighting for tomorrow. The Scarlet Ember was gone, but Ruby's fire burned brighter than ever, and that flame, she knew, would never be extinguished. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. Friends, I hope Ruby and Elias's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine. Drop a comment and let me know where in the world you're listening from. I love connecting with fellow Western romance enthusiasts. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of courage, love, and redemption in the American frontier. What did you think of Ruby's transformation? Share your thoughts below.